we see a woman, Holly, injecting her head with a needle. It is connected to a certain tuning device. As the woman tunes it, she cries for an unknown reason. Then she appears in a sophisticated lobby, looking different. Another lady comes to her to tell her where she has been. Soon, they start ascending a staircase in a luxurious golden room. It leads them into a room where a high-class party is taking place. We observe that a few people there are wearing the same jumpsuit Holly is wearing. Upon coming to a heavyset man, Holly instantly stabs him. That causes the crowd to run in fear. The reason for her action is entirely unknown. The purposeful mindset with which she executed it makes us believe she is a type of assassin. After that, Holly takes a gun and tells someone who we don't see to pull her out. The police soon arrive to point their guns at her. When she starts shooting, they shoot her too. Of course, a few of them against one of her allows the lawman to bring her down. Once that is over, an entirely different woman exits what appears to have been a simulation. Was Holly undergoing such an experience? She vomits, seconds after returning to herself. She is Tassia, our protagonist. Shortly after, she takes certain items out of a box to talk about them. Another woman, Gerder, makes notes of what Tassia tells her. One of the items she takes out is a butterfly in a box. Tassia says she took its life when she was little, before mounting it inside that box. She felt guilty as a child, and she feels guilty even now. She then takes something else out, saying it isn't hers. With that, Gerder informs Tassia that her results are normal. It seems to have been some sort of memory test. After her simulation, her mental state needs to be checked like this, because it seems like their technology could cause mental disruptions. Soon, Tassia starts talking about a man named Michael. Gerder tells her they are separated. Tassia seems to know that, but says she's been talking to him. The next scene has Tassia standing outside, practicing how she is going to greet her family. Such behavior is strange indeed. It is very likely the nature of her job that makes her undergo such unorthodox rehearsals. Soon enough, she arrives at the house to meet Michael, along with their son. We see how she says one of the lines she practiced saying. While they eat, Michael asks her how her trip was. Tassia tells him it was fine, yet very dull. Since we know what she went through, dull is not the kind of word anyone would use to describe it. Due to that, Michael likely doesn't know what her job is. Afterward, she watches TV alone. The screen displays a newswoman saying that a woman named Holly took a man's life. Of course, the description matches Tassia's experience. It looks like it wasn't a simulation, it happened in the real world. What kind of technology is her agency using? Later, while Tassia is intimate with Michael, we see her mind is occupied by the thought of what she did as Holly. Then she calls Gerder to tell her she wasn't herself yesterday. She is ready to work now. When Michael comes to her, she lets him know she may have to fly out again. However, the man wants her to move back in with them. As he talks to her, she perceives the same wound on his neck as she gave to a man at the party. It is dominating her thoughts. In the next scene, Tassia is back, talking to Gerder. The latter tells her she has a very special nature. After saying a few words, she starts showing Tassia photos of her job as Holly. Gerder wants to know why she stabbed the man, instead of using the gun she was given. Tassia answers that it looked more in character to do it the way she did. Whose character? Gerder asks. Since Tassia doesn't answer, we realize it can be difficult to tell who one is while engaged in such an experience. Following that, Gerder starts describing the details of her new job. Tassia will have to take control of a man named Colin Tate. She has to make him take the lives of a few people, ending with. After that, a man named Reed will inherit a company called Zuthru, which is the real target of this mission. Once they own Reed, they own the company. Tassia's only response to that orientation is asking when she starts the job. With such an attitude toward her work, it is no wonder why Gerder thinks highly of her. Subsequently, Tassia watches Colin using a telescope. The man is there with his girlfriend, Ava. Tassia also hears what they say. It seems like there is an auditory connection somewhere. In listening to them, she repeats many of their lines to herself. She's doing this to practice the person she will soon become, so she won't make mistakes with her behavior. Then, for some reason, her hand starts giving her trouble. At some other time, we see Colin lying inside a vehicle. Tassia's agency has acquired him. The personnel inside the vehicle communicate with Gerder by video. She warns Tassia that she will be locked into Colin with this performance. She has to use her calibration device at least once per day. We learn that possessing another body after a certain time could have unwanted side effects. The calibration device is what we saw at the start of our story. That small machine Holly tuned after placing a needle in her head. Eventually, Tassia starts undergoing the possession procedure. A device gets placed on her head. Shortly after, she starts dissolving, and Colin starts to form in her place. This is a representation of what is happening mentally. Soon enough, Tassia wakes up as Colin. It must be very strange to wake up as somebody else. Colin starts walking in a dizzy state. He stands before a mirror to look at himself. This is the person Tassia has to become for a short time. Afterward, Colin sees Ava. She tells him she did not hear him get in last night. The excuse he gives her is that he arrived late. Upon asking him how his trip was, the man says it was thrilling. As he talks to her, Ava asks what is up with him today. It seems like Tassa isn't mimicking him properly. He asks her what she means, but Ava can't seem to put it into words. All she says is that he's gone strange on her. When he is alone, he perceives some small unknown thing moving around in the air. It seems like something Tassa is not familiar with, so he grabs it, to soon discover it has vanished from his touch. Later, Colin arrives somewhere and undergoes security protocol. As he walks, a man runs up to him to startle him with his abrupt talking. Colin does not know what the man is talking about, yet he manages to play it off smoothly. We don't know how long Tassa has been doing work like this. However, she must have learned along the way how to deal with such sudden interruptions that she has zero information about. After that, Colin walks into a room where he looks at many people wearing special eyewear. Joining them, he uses the goggles to intrusively look into people's homes so that he can report the kind of curtains they have installed. While he does it, a woman's voice asks him if something is wrong. She tells him he's slow and needs to focus. Shortly after, he experiences a problem that prompts him to take the goggles off. After he does, he perceives that weird small thing again. Colin touches it to get a strange reaction this time. It forces him to leave the area. As he walks away, he experiences distortions. He soon sees himself along with Tassa. Some abnormal activity is certainly taking place while she possesses this man. We wonder what it is. Gerder tells him to check in when he lies on the floor. Once he does, she asks him what happened. His levels spiked, making him unreachable. Wanting to assure Gerder that everything is okay, Colin says nothing happened. He adds that he just started his shift at Zuthru. He also requests that an analysis be done due to what took place. At that moment, we see how their conversations take place. Gerder sits next to the immobilized Tassa to speak with her naturally. They don't use some special device planted inside them to communicate. Colin tells her not to worry, because he has the situation under control. Following this, he occupies the washroom where he talks to the man who ran up to him earlier. He asks Colin if he's okay, because he witnessed him run out of his area. Yet Colin says he is fine. At a different time, Colin observes Tassa's family from a distance. Of course, it is Tassa who is truly observing them. He then comes home to Ava, who asks him where he was. Lying, he tells her he worked a double shift. She replies by hugging him and saying she almost called the police. Ava has some friends over who Colin joined. Since Ava is the daughter of Zuthru's boss, one of the ladies asks why her father placed her boyfriend in such a low position. Ava says her dad has a habit of putting her most serious partners through such ordeals. Later, Colin stands observing the city. He is now alone with Ava. She wants to know what is going on with him. The man tells her he is fine, though he is exhausted, because she is concerned for him. She says he does not have to keep his Zuthru job if it's bringing him down so much. Colin swears that he is fine. Ava gets upset at their lack of communication. She says she loves him. After telling her that he does too, they engage in intimacy. On the next day, Colin tries reaching Gerder. She comes on to tell him the analysis he requested is inconclusive, but he tells her that the connection with the body feels great. There is no problem. Gerder wants him to recalibrate, giving him certain parameters to set. So he places the needle in his head to do that. Just like Holly before him, he also cries as he tunes the device. The next scene has Colin sitting inside a sophisticated place, listening to Ava's father, John Parse, give a speech about boredom. He says boredom is necessary for innovation to take place. After that, Colin is with Ava. She tells him she loves her dad, yet he is an atrocity. Colin responds that he is a great man. Ava, though, questions whether the man is even human. Then she brings Colin to her father. John says that Colin should let him know if the job he's making him do gets too hard for him. While alone, Colin walks around the house. He tells Gerder he's in place. His boss instructs him to get into a fight with John, which leads to Colin getting thrown out. She wants it to be public. With that information, Colin gets himself drunk. He walks up to John afterward, while the man converses with two others. When John turns around, Colin tells him he owes him an apology. At first, John laughs at such an uncalled-for interruption. What comes next is the boss rudely telling Colin to go away somewhere. That causes his daughter's boyfriend to utter a very rude statement in return. John's friend tries to deal with him. However, Colin lands a strike on him. His wild behavior prompts some personnel to grab him. As they hold him, he acts like a maniac, yelling that he is a giant that no one can step on. Ava comes to calm him down, and he yells at the poor lady too. She is flabbergasted by his outburst. It earns him a punch before he gets evicted from the building. He did exactly what Gerder wanted him to do. Outside, Colin loads his gun. He starts walking back inside the house. In the meantime, Ava tells her dad she does not think she can go home tonight, so he tells her to stay there. He is unbearable, she tells him. Once she gets up to go to bed, John rudely tells her to run off to Dubai with her mom. Shortly after, Colin comes to sit with him. He places his gun on the table, making John ask what that means. He also tells Colin to leave before he calls the police. He then starts going to bed, but swiftly turns around to go for the gun. Colin reacts quickly by bringing the boss down and striking him continuously with a metal stick. He tries to end John by using the stick lethally. At that point, Ava comes down, only to be greeted by her partner's gunfire. She manages to escape with injuries, though they don't allow her to get very far. She struggles and falls on the floor. That is where she experiences her final moment. Believing that he completed his mission, Colin says to pull him out, while pointing a gun at him. That is the only way for Tassia to exit, to have her hosts lose their lives. Yet he can't seem to shoot the gun for some reason. He falls to the floor, yelling for him to get taken out. Since he still can't fire the gun, he takes a glass shard to end things that way instead. Back at Tassia's agency, we see blood coming out of Tassia's mouth. A doctor says she is surging. He also says he is reading physical damage to the implant. We observe that Colin is still alive as he keeps walking elsewhere. He arrives at a dumpster to collect some clothes, needing to get out of his bloody ones. At the agency, a doctor tells Gerder that Tassia was unable to maintain control of Colin's will. She also gives the unsettling news that Colin seems to be the dominant in the body, not Tassia. We realize that is why she was unable to use Colin's hand to pull the trigger. Gerder responds that she wants to leave Tassia inside to finish the job. The doctor also tells her that Tassia already has permanent damage. The longer she stays as Colin, the greater the risk to her brain. Inside a washroom, Colin removes the glass shard from his head. After he's done that, he gets a disturbing image of him hurting John. Then a woman who sounds like Gerder calls him on the phone. She addresses him as Mr. Tate instead of as Tassia. He just ends the call quickly, proving that Colin truly is the more dominant part of the mind now. While walking outside, he keeps getting images. Following that, he arrives at Ava's friend's house. She is Rita, who lets him in because they're supposed to know each other. He tells her he did it so they could be together. Confused, Rita asks what he has done. Colin tells her the truth in fragments, saying he was angry and that they attacked him. That explanation does not make sense to her. After that, he says something odd, that he should have stayed with Michael. We see that is Tassia's mind coming out of him, but neither she nor he is aware of it. If Tassia is even conscious anymore, which is uncertain. Of course, Rita questions who Michael is. Colin says he doesn't know. The lady soon tends to his wound. The man wants to know if he can stay there, because he fought with Ava. She allows him to stay for 2 nights. Later, Colin sits watching television while practicing talking. Soon enough, he goes to point a gun at Rita as she showers. When she turns around, we perceive Tassia standing there instead of Colin. That shows us she has regained some mental control. We do not see what happens with Rita. At another time, Colin watches the news to discover that John has survived the attack, though he is in a very injured state. Someone then knocks on the door, prompting Colin to open it. It is the man from work, who Colin calls Eddie. He tells Colin that Rita called him over. However, a surprise takes place after Colin turns around. Eddie uses a special gun to shoot his coworker. That brings us to get an interesting image of a crippled John in a wheelchair. Tassia is there to look at him. This possibly means that she knows he is still alive. Returning to Rita's place, we see Eddie operating on an unconscious Colin. As he opens his eyes, Eddie starts talking to Tassia inside him. He knows who she is and supposedly works for her agency. He informs her that he temporarily suppressed her host's will, though they need to move quickly before the effects wear off. As an instinctive reaction, Colin swiftly takes the gun to point at Eddie, who in return wants Tassia to understand that Gerder sent him to save her. So Colin lowers the weapon. Eddie also uses that opportunity to tell Tassia he is a fan of hers. Colin has to interrupt him to instruct the fan that he wants to be shot to his demise. Unfortunately, Eddie cannot do that, telling Colin it has to be done by him. Since that is the case, he lies down to finish the operation. While Eddie continues with it, we observe shifting images of Tassia versus Colin lying in bed. Soon enough, Colin comes to choke Tassia. He ends up crushing her head, before using the result to wear like it's a mask. This is a representation of what is happening on the mental level. Wearing her deformed face, we realize that deformity is the current state of Tassia's mind. We see many of her memories that Colin now has access to. Then Colin wakes up to see Eddie lying lifeless on the floor. It causes the man to get even tenser. We also see what happened to Rita, so he puts the gun to and tries to end things again. He keeps yelling to do it until he fires and misses. Colin just cannot let the Tassia inside him claim his life. This is the most difficult mission she's probably ever had. At that moment, Tassia starts talking to the agency, causing Gerder to come to her. The next scene has Colin arriving at Tassia's family's house. Since he has access to her memories, this has now become a possibility. He practices saying the words she did when she stood there. Colin seems to have waited until night to knock on the door to Tassia's house. Michael comes near to hear Colin tell him he is a friend of Tassia. Not wanting to talk about this, Michael says she doesn't live there anymore. But Colin barges inside to soon hold Michael down at gunpoint. He demands to know where Tassia is, yet her husband does not know. Colin also wants to know what she did to him. Michael, however, does not even understand what he's talking about. That makes the man start talking about a worm entering her brain, which gradually transforms her into someone else. He yells out to Tassia inside him, asking if she's seeing all of this happen. He urges her to come out, or he will discard Michael. Once he says that, he gets to meet Tassia in his mind. He asks her now what she has done to him. He doesn't receive any kind of answer, though. If she does not fix this bizarre condition of his, he threatens to take Michael's life again. For some reason, the woman in his mind tells him to do it. But Michael fights back at that point. He manages to collect the gun, only to miss Colin upon firing it. No one can end this man. Colin is much more successful in his attempt to finish Michael. Following this, Colin says to pull him out again. He then gets a surprise lethal attack by Tassia's son, who he shoots. Tassia then shoots her own son as well. We see her son lying almost lifeless, calling to pull him out too. Colin has finally met his demise. In the agency, a woman's headgear gets removed. It is Gerda who is lying there. Tassia follows in her awakening, at last returning to herself. Tassia turns to look at her boss, who supposedly took control of Tassia's son to save her special employee. Later, Tassia looks at the items again that are associated with her memory. Looking at the butterfly box, she no longer says she feels guilty about having taken the insect's life. Her memory seems to be working very well, yet she was in favor of ridding herself of her family. We do not get to understand why she wanted that.